Friends, will you pray with me? Holy One, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable and pleasing in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. So I don't know how many of you have read all of the Gospel of Matthew recently. If you have, raise a hand, because we should celebrate that. But if you haven't, that is A-okay. That is not a requirement to be in this space, and you are wonderful the way that you are. I have read the entire Gospel of Matthew recently. And I would like to share with you, friends, that it can be an anxiety-inducing book. I had to take a break about 13 chapters in because I just plowed through a list of terrifying binaries, and my little postmodern heart couldn't take it. We were either with Jesus or against him. We were either good trees bearing good fruit or bad trees bearing bad fruit. We were either good earth or bad earth. We were either weeds or wheat. And in the weeds or wheat one, there was some kind of harvest coming, and there's going to be some kind of separation of weeds and wheat. And we're not going to know until the harvest comes whether we're weeds to be burned or wheat to be stored. It's anxiety-inducing stuff. I literally had to put my Bible down and go for a run to make myself feel better. Because either ors can get scary when you're a person who prefers both ands. And I get the sense that we tend to, as a group of people, be not only ones who prefer both ands, but we like everything in betweens. So it can be kind of a scary book. I think that reaction of being a little bit scared is one of the reactions that the author of the Gospel of Matthew wants their audience to have. I don't think it's by accident that a reader or a hearer might start to feel a little bit worried about where they stand and where their neighbors stand. Worried if they're weeds or wheat. I think that's at least one of the points of the gospel. The Gospel of Matthew was composed for a traumatized people in an uncertain time. Composed sometime between 80 and 100-ish. This is a gospel for people who've lived through the first Jewish-Roman War, through the siege and fall of Jerusalem, through the destruction of the temple by Roman imperial hands. This is a gospel for people forced to give what had been their temple tax in Jerusalem to the upkeep of the temple to Jupiter in Rome. A gospel for a traumatized people forced to pay for their own subjugation or face consequences that could cost them their lives. This context gets even more complicated when we bring in following Jesus, the Jesus who was executed, the Jesus who'd resurrected and then gone away again, the Jesus who'd promised some of his first disciples that they would not taste death before they saw the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. The Jesus who still hadn't come back. People had died, and Jerusalem had been overtaken, and the temple had been destroyed, and Jesus hadn't come back. To me, that seems like the kind of context that might encourage a people to reevaluate their priorities, to wonder if it's really worth it. When it might cost me my life, is this really what I believe? Or is it easier to pay my tax and keep my head down and secure a future for myself and my family in any way I can? This is the context where we find the Gospel of Matthew, a gospel for a traumatized people in an uncertain time. From a composer doing their best to convince a community that it is worth it, that Jesus wasn't just some rabbi, but the Messiah, and that to stay the people who follow this Messiah, the people must live every day as though it might be the day the Messiah comes back. This is where we find the story of the 10 bridesmaids. 5 wise, 5 foolish. 5 prepared and over-prepared with oil enough for an unforeseen delay on the part of the groom. 5 prepared but not over-prepared, sent scrambling out into the night to find a merchant who will sell them oil enough for their torches. 5 wise and 5 foolish bridesmaids. 5 welcomed into the banquet with the groom, 5 shut out and told that the groom does not know them. 5 with a feast, a party, a place in a community. 5 left with nothing. Therefore, be on the alert, for you do not know the day or the hour when the Son of Man will come. In or out, good fruit or bad fruit, wheat or weeds. Ouch. If there is no room for in-betweens in this story, if there is no room for sharing oil and everybody getting inside, then the rational thing to do as a person hearing this story is to make sure to secure a place for yourself. The next step is to make sure you have enough oil. This is the point in the sermon where I want to invite you to pop out with me, to complicate things a little bit, to take a peek at what's happening around this parable, and to do a little bit of thinking about how people are. We're going to start with how people are. When we get scared, when we are traumatized people in uncertain times, a thing that we like to do is secure a place for ourselves. We like to say, gosh, how can I make sure that I have enough oil to make sure that I will be okay? How can I accumulate enough to assure that no matter what happens in the world, I and the people that I love will be safe? That story, that knee-jerk reaction story that says if I just have enough stuff, I'll be fine, that's the story I want to complicate with the stories of the parable, stories around the parable of the 10 bridesmaids. The story directly before our story is one of an enslaved person put in charge of his master's house in anxious and uncertain times, who uses his power to secure a place for himself with feasting and with violence. He eats and drinks in excess and is cruel to the people around him who remain enslaved. When the master returns, the enslaved man is not triumphant, but is cast out with the hypocrites. Similarly, in the story after the story of the 10 bridesmaids, a master goes away and entrusts the work of investing different parts of his fortune to 3 different enslaved people. And when the master returns, the one who closes his fist around his fortune, who keeps it secure and does not put it to use, is thrown out into the outer darkness with weeping and gnashing of teeth. Friends, the oil with which we must be prepared and over-prepared cannot be found through closing fists around our fortunes. It cannot be found through feasting while others suffer enslavement. No. To find the oil, we must go one story further. We must go to the sheep and the goats, to the separation between them, to the king who says, "Come, you blessed of my Father, inherit a kingdom. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I was naked, and you clothed me, sick, and you visited me, in prison, and you came to me. I assure you, the extent to which you did these things for my siblings, you did them for me." Friends, that is the oil with which we are called to be prepared and over-prepared. Oil that shares our resources with open hands. Oil that stands in solidarity with our siblings, knowing that we are not free if they are not free. Oil that knows my well-being is bound up inextricably with your well-being. We are living in anxious and uncertain times. Each of us is traumatized or a heartbeat away from someone who is traumatized. The news hurts to read. The conflict between Israel and Palestine shakes most of what we have come to know about everything from geopolitics to where we as individual humans draw the lines in our souls around acceptable deaths. Your fear is real, and it is justified. I know the urge to close ranks is strong. I know fear says tight fists, secure a place for yourself. But our God says open hands, secure a place for the one beside you, and beside you, and beside you, until the whole world is liberated and dwells in peace. Amen.